On today's show, we interview a guest who spells his first name A-L-A-I-N. How do you think he pronounces it?
It is pronounced Alain, which is a French version of Alain. Alain.
And again, the name is spelled A-L-A-I-N.
You don't say the N. It's the same sound, like in cat. With an with an L in the middle. Alain.
And the last name is Hunkins. Again, the last name is Hunkins.
Hunkins. That's easy. That's the easy part. Yeah.
Alain Hunkins. I'm going to do it.
You got it.
Okay.
That's great, Clay.
All right. Well, let me cue up the intro. We'll be off to the races. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and...
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top. Teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of 5, that's why I'm a dive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the C&Z up on your radio. And now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here.
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we are in for a special occasion as today's guest will teach us how to be a leader that A-player employees need. Today's guest, he has been a consultant. He has spoken to Wal-Mart, Pfizer, Citigroup, General Electric, State Farm, IBM, General Motors, Microsoft, and now he is stuck with me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the man with a plan, Alain Hunkins. How are you, sir?
I am doing great, Clay. I'm super excited to be with you. My favorite thing in the world to do is to help people thrive, and I think this is prime Thrive time. So I am thrilled to share some lessons I've learned with you and Thrive Time Nation and help all of us become stronger leaders in our lives.
Well, let's start off with the deep question here, the deep questions. The pronunciation of your name. Everybody's looking up your name right now, and they're going A-L-A-I-N. Okay. Hunkins, Hunkins. Help somebody out there work through the pronunciation guide.
You got it. So, yeah, it's a French name. My mom is from Brussels, Belgium. She gave me a super common name. It's pronounced Alain. Alain Hunkins, right? It's a French name and then not such a French name. Alain Hunkins. That's me. And I'm all at Alain, ALAINHUNKINS.com.
So tell us here, where did your career start? Like, what was, I guess let's start with this. What was your life like growing up? Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So ever since I can remember, I've been fascinated by some pretty deep questions like, why do people do what they do? Or why do some people create clarity and other people create confusions? And what the heck is a 5-year-old kid thinking about these kinds of questions, right? So it had a lot to do with my unusual upbringing. Now, I mentioned that my mother is an immigrant, right? She came from Brussels, Belgium. I grew up in New York City, which is why I don't have a French accent. I'm American by birth. And so my maternal grandmother was my primary parent, my mom's mom. My mom was a single mom, and my grandmother took care of me during the day while my mom worked as an employee for a food service company. Now, that's not that unusual, but what the unusual part is that both my mom and my grandmother are both Holocaust survivors. And actually, during World War II, they were separated from each other for 3 years. In fact, my mom was in hiding from the time she was 7 until she was 10. And they went through a pretty crazy time in human history. And thankfully, they both survived the war. But that kind of trauma certainly leaves scars. And it taught me a lot. You know, we all know that we learn our first primary classroom is our family of origin. And so I had this one very intense experience at home, but then when I was at school, I'd have a very different experience. So for me, I was always really interested in why do people do what they do? And that kind of went on, and I ended up studying psychology for a while in college. I actually went on and got a degree in acting. I went to an acting school and studied theater for a while. So it's around human behavior and what motivates us. And that's what kind of led me into teaching and then ultimately getting into leadership training. So it's been a really long and winding road. It's funny. It all makes sense when you look at it in hindsight. But at the time, there was nothing straight lined about it as I went through. And certainly I had my share of entrepreneurialness too. So kind of growing up as a first-generation American, I learned a lot about the value of hard work and had all sorts of odd jobs along the way.
I don't recommend that the listeners go out there and buy a copy of Mein Kampf today. But I do want to make sure that we address this real quick because this is powerful. You said that your mother and grandmother survived the Holocaust. And Adolf Hitler said famously in his book, Mein Kampf, he said, if you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. In your mind, as a guy who studied history and psychology, why would an entire group of people team up to try to remove an entire race of people from the planet? I mean, what kind of sick? I mean, how does that even happen? I just want to get your take on that because you obviously are an expert of human behavior and what they do. And
Sure.
as a guy of German ancestry, I don't understand why people of my ancestry have started both world wars. Like, what is that all about?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing, because if you look at not just people psychology, but just look at organizational psychology and look at just how easily people are influenced by others. And also, when things are bad, how quickly humans want to point the finger at somebody else. And if you look at where Germany was coming out of World War I and into World War II, before then, it was in a horrible shape, and they were looking for a scapegoat. And so someone comes along and says, we have a scapegoat, this whole tribe, this race of people. And somehow there were enough people who were involved with the critical mass of that. And then there were enough people who just were willing to go along. And, one of the challenges with leadership is, are the bystanders willing to stand by, or do people really stay committed to their values? And so that's why it's so important for us to all recognize that it's our duty to speak up. When something's wrong, is to do something about it and not just stand on the sidelines.
I have read where you were citing the statistic that only 23% of people think their leaders lead well. I would love for you to help better equip our listeners for managing people in a world of increasing speed and complexity. We live in this digital world where everybody has access to all these digital tools. I mean, employees can go on, they can go apply for jobs right now on their smartphone while they're at your workplace. Their employees can have access to adult content they didn't have before. Employees can do a lot of nefarious stuff they couldn't do before. Give us some tips for managing and how to navigate in the world of increasing digital complexity and speed.
Well, here's the thing about it, right, is that the old playbook of leadership has really gone by the wayside. I tell this story, and maybe this is an old story. You might have heard this one. It's called the story of the holiday roast. So there's this young woman decides she's going to cook her family's traditional holiday roast, and she gets the family recipe. It's been handed down, and she reads through it, and she says, this is weird because on the recipe it says that she should cut the end off the roast before she puts it in the oven. So she asks her mom why she does it. Her mom says, well, that's the way my mom taught me. Why don't you ask your grandma? And so she go ahead and she calls her grandma, and she asks her the same thing. Why do you cut the end off the roast? And her grandma says, that's how my mom taught me. So her great-grandma is still alive. She asks her the same question. And after a long pause, her 94-year-old great-grandma says, we had a small oven, right? And so what's interesting is I bring this up because so many organizations and leaders suffer from what I'll call small oven thinking. So why do we lead the way we do? Well, it's probably because that's the way our leaders taught us. And while our leadership recipe has generally stayed the same from generation to generation, our work world has totally transformed. I mean, this is an example, and I talk about this in the book, is in the 1970s, the average leader dealt with about 1,000 external communications per year. I mean, if you break that down, that works out to less than 4 a day. Can you imagine a world where you have 4 communications a day? Today, that number has exploded to over 30,000 a year, right? So if you think about it, the ability for information technology to explode, yet our leadership technology hasn't kept pace. And so the keys and what I call the 3 secrets to effective leadership are around connection, communication, and collaboration. The fact is our world is going so fast, and what we need is leaders who understand how humans are wired. And the fact is that, information might move at the speed of light, but people and human relationships travel a lot slower. And you need to have the wisdom to know when to go fast and when to go slow, and the discernment to tell the difference between those two things.
Your new book, Cracking the Leadership Code, 3 Secrets to Building Strong Leaders. Again, that's Cracking the Leadership Code, 3 Secrets to Building Strong Leaders. You talk about these 3 C's, the connection, the communication, the collaboration. Let's kind of let's go deep enough into each one where the listeners can kind of, get their feet wet, we have got some business ducks out there. They want to put their feet in the pond, kind of figure out, should I invest the whopping $20 needed to buy this book? Connection. Let's talk about connection. What do we need to know about connection?
Well, connection is the foundation of relationship. I mean, and all leadership. And by the way, you can be an entrepreneur. Everyone is a leader. If you're trying to influence somebody else, you're in a leadership role. So some people think, that's not my title. It is your title. You're a leader no matter what role you play. So connection is the heart of the relationship. And the basis of connection, a human-to-human connection, is empathy. Right. And the idea, my best definition of empathy is showing people that you understand them and care how they feel. You've probably heard the old expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yep.
Right. And so that basic human, I care about you, I value you, I'm here to help you. That's the basis of it. Now, that sounds so simple, right? And yet there are a lot of things that can get in the way. In fact, in the book, I write about 6 different barriers that leaders face to leading with empathy, and actually 6 ways to overcome those. So on the one hand, connection starts with empathy. And the other key piece to connection is credibility. The fact is, you are only as good as people think you are. And there's a few keys to credibility. And I'll just share with you the number one thing that you can do to be credible, and it's really simple, and you're going to hear it and go, that's it. It's show up on time. Because if you stop and think about it, being present or being absent is the easiest thing in the world to measure. You're either there or you're not. And people make all sorts of judgments about people, whether or not they're present. And so it's the best keystone habit to start to cultivate, to start to build your track record and your integrity as a person who does what you say you're going to do.
And knowledge bomb for somebody out there. What is so important to grasp is you just said one of the keys to being an effective leader is being on time. And somebody's in the car right now, driving, usually in pairs of 2 people driving, husband and wife. The wife is looking at the husband going, see, told you. Or he's looking at her going, mm-hmm. So I want to ask you this because we have about 500,000 listeners, many of which are small business owners, okay? Now, this is where it gets weird. The owner, I just dealt with this today, and I'll speak in very general terms so I don't get myself in trouble. I have a female client I work with who's always on time. She started the company. She's on time. He is never on time. Not only is he not on time, he doesn't even try to be on time, but he pretends he does. He gets about 9 to 10 minutes late, and then he does the late guy hustle. You see these people at the airport doing the late guy hustle, where it's kind of like a walk, run, jog hybrid kind of thing. And he goes, I am sorry. Traffic it didn't matter what time the appointment is. We have to move the appointment time, reschedule. And she has gotten to a place, I've worked with this person for a long time, where everybody in the organization now no longer takes them seriously. So let's speak to the person who's chronically late all the time. What advice do you have for this person?
To recognize that you may have the best intentions, like you're saying, I'm sorry, you may have the best intentions, but others don't measure us by our intentions. Others measure us by our actions. And if you stop and recognize that, what are your actions saying? What my actions, when I show up late, what my actions are saying is, I had more important things going on than you. So that's what my actions are saying. And realizing, is that the impact that you want to have? Now, I'm not suggesting that we're all perfect. There are times that we don't do it, but our consistent track record should be what we want it to be. And so
that's good. Learn
the habit that you need to do, because it's one of the most important things. I mean, in my business, my reputation is basically what I sell, right? Is that I believe that I should be as accurate as a Swiss watch. So that's where I'd start. I'd start realizing, what's the impact that you're having, and is that the impact you want to be having?
Has your research shown you that it's important for leaders to write stuff down and to actually follow up on the things they say they're going to do? Because we have that world now. We have thousands of, you mentioned it, back in the day, people had very few communications per year. Now Psychology Today has shown the average person gets 90 interruptions a day via email or call or text. Do you find that super successful people write things down and follow up?
I can't imagine living without my planner. And I actually use a paper planner, which some of my colleagues laugh at me. Now, I do have some backups on electronic versions on my phone and whatnot, but there's something about the act of writing things down that sort of cements things into my neural system, my brain. I can't imagine how I can keep track of things. There's just way too much in life. And there's also something that what I find in the research, the neuroscience research will find that actually when you put something out of your head onto paper, it actually frees up some of your working memory. So the other big bonus, besides remembering it, it actually lowers your stress levels, which is huge, right? I mean, we're all way too busy, and there's just too much information out there. I know
today, I wanted to hammer home, I wanted to agree with what you're saying there. I know that today, when we hop off today, I'm supposed to write a path or a business plan for a nursing home. I'm supposed to write questions for a man by the name of Jimmy Dykes. I'm supposed to print off and sign an agreement. I'm supposed to figure out what keywords to optimize for Cavell Fitness. I'm supposed to audit a sermon for a pastor. I'm supposed to follow up with Dr. Chad Edwards about a online portal for his patients. I mean, I've got a huge list in front of me, and I just think somebody out there is really fighting this idea of writing stuff down. Does that create problems with communication as we move on to the next C? If you work with somebody, if you work for a leader who you know they communicate verbally they're going to do something and then they don't do it. Talk to me about this whole communication thing.
Sure thing. So here's the thing with communication, because no one communicates for communication's sake. The goal of communication is to create a baseline common level of understanding where we now have a platform to take action. That is the entire goal of communication. None other. Full stop. Right? Because you think about it, the challenge that we have is so often we have these meetings and then, time to go. And yet people don't stop and clarify, what did we walk out of here committing to? And if we miss the call to action and the commitment in our meetings, we're missing the whole point. And so
this is so good. This is so good. I'm going to cry. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm having an emotional out. This is so good. There's so many knowledge bombs per capita. Continue, my friend.
There we go. Sure. So the whole idea, so we want to make sure, because when I have great understanding, I can take the best decisions to lead to the best results. And when I walk out of a meeting and I have missed understanding, I'm going to make poor decisions and I'm going to end up with lousy results. It's just, those are the principles. And so in the book, and the whole third part of the book is about communication, I talk about the biggest challenges to communicating effectively. And then the next chapter talks about 6 practices you can do to clarify and become a more effective communicator.
This book right here, Josh, you've been a client of mine for a long time.
Yes, sir.
I feel like right before we wrap up every meeting, I repeat what I'm going to do. You repeat what you're going to do. I know if we didn't do that, we would have no idea what we're going to do.
No, it completely eliminates all confusion and makes sure that we're both staying on task and what we've committed to.
Dude, this book sounds like it could be game-changing.
I think it really, really is powerful.
It's called Cracking the Leadership Code, 3 Secrets to Building Strong Leaders. Let's talk about collaboration. What does your book teach us about collaboration there?
Well, with collaboration, is recognizing that, a lot of people think of collaboration and they kind of go, well, where do I start? And the way I think of collaboration from a leadership perspective is leaders, you can't actually motivate anybody else. That's one of my theories that I kind of go into in the book, is that you can't actually motivate anyone else. But as a leader, what you can do is you can create the conditions where someone else is most likely to be motivated. And so what we talk about in the book is if you think about a traditional architect, an architect designs a building, they use structure, they use points, they use line, they use shape. A leadership architect designs environments where people can thrive or people can barely survive. And instead of working with traditional structure, point, line, things that usual architects use, leadership architects work with human needs. And in the book, I talk about the 4 needs that need to be fulfilled that we all have in order to thrive. And those needs, and I go into depth, there's a couple chapters on each of these. So we go into, everyone has a need for safety. And safety is a multiple dimension thing. So you've got fiscal safety or economic safety, you've got physical safety, and you've got psychological safety. So you've got safety, and then there's a need for energy, that we all want to be energized and enthused. So what do you do as a leader to harness the power of energy within a group? Then what do you do to bring out a sense of purpose? Because we all know that when something really matters to somebody, they bring more energy to it, and they actually do a better job. And then the final need is around giving people a sense of ownership. And all the research shows that when people feel that they have autonomy and freedom to do things the way they see fit, they're much more passionately motivated. So we go into how you as a leader, through some simple tools and tips and techniques, can start to create an environment where people can thrive and you can be a much more collaborative and effective workforce together.
Now, I'm going to be coming in hot here with my final 5 questions. We're doing 5 minutes, 5 questions. Let's see if we can do it. Here we go.
Okay.
What was your process like for writing the book?
Great question. I have wanted to write a book for a long time, and I have a great mentor. He said a really wise thing. He said, writers write. Profound, obvious, isn't it? And so what I started doing was because I've been working with leaders for 20 some odd years. So I started taking notes, and then I started committing to a blog, because I figured easier to commit to writing 500 to 700 words once a week than trying to write a whole book. So I started with a blog, and the blogs kept going. I put myself on a once-a-week schedule, and after a few years, I had 150 or so on posts. The blogs, then I looked at themes, and then I started creating chapters out of that, and then the outlines in the book came from there. So I started small, and I started moving forward with that.
You're a proactive guy. How do you organize the first 4 hours of every day, and what time do you wake up?
Okay, well, I'd love to say I wake up consistently at the same time. Now, I travel quite a bit, and I work all around the world, so I deal with the jet lag thing. So what I try to do, ideally, is I wake up early, and I have made a plan. I talked about my paper planner. I have planned my biggest priorities the night before, and when I wake up, those are the first things that I do, because that's when I'm also freshest mentally. So I try to take care of the biggest stuff, the cognitive heavy lifting that I do first thing as I get started. And then I leave more administrative tasks and phone calls and things like that for later in the day when my brain starts to fry.
Next question. Question number 3. Why won't A-player employees work for a C-player boss?
Because they have options. We live in this transparent world between LinkedIn and Glassdoor. I mean, people know where the grass is greener. And the number one reason that people give why they leave their job is their inability to learn and grow. And A players want to learn and grow because that's what makes them A. And working for a C-level boss, they can take their skills and go down the block.
That is powerful. If you're out there today, again, I'd rate yourself on a scale of A to F and say, hey, how good of a leader am I? Look at it objectively. And if you feel like you don't know if you feel like you're kind of stuck and you're being a C-player boss, don't be shocked when your A-player players don't want to stick around. I know Josh Wilson has a final question here for you, but this is my 4th question for you here. What's one message you want to share with the Thrive Nation? What's the one thing you want to share with the Thrive Nation?
Oh, I would say that Thrive Nation, the number one thing that makes leadership work, it's connection. Let's face it, at the end of the day, we're all human. And finding your way, and this is whether it's with a colleague, an employee, a customer, a friend, a parent, a child, a spouse, it's all about connection. And if you can find ways to connect and make people feel valued and that you care about them and want to help them, that is how you're going to lead your way towards success.
You are just a knowledge bomb buffet. Josh Wilson, you're the owner of Living Water Irrigation. You manage a team. You have about a $2 million business. Surely you can stump today's guest with a tough, paint him into a corner question. The kind of questions he's not prepared for. The question where he's going to leave going, I don't even know.
Just a terrible, just horrible.
Yeah, paint him into a corner. Here we go.
So here's what mine would be. For all of us small business owners out there, I have a team of 15. So for guys like me who are out running a small team or a great team, what would be an action item besides going and buying your book and implementing what's in there? What would be a one actionable thing you would say to our listeners? Hey, if you guys go do this, it's going to improve you as a leader, and it's going to help with those 3 C's with your team.
You got it. Great question. So here's the number one thing I think you should do as a leader, and I've learned this from a number of leaders I worked with, which is make your implicit assumptions explicit. Because people are very good at many things, but mind reading is not one of them. So if you have explicit ways that you like to work, for example, how often you want to communicate, how you expect responses to come, how people deal with customers, let people know that and then coach them against that. Because if I don't know what you want, then how could I possibly meet that expectation? So number one thing, make your implicit expectations explicit.
That's powerful.
I'm typing this up here. Make your implicit expectations explicit.
You got it.
Where can people learn more about you, my friend? Like, what's your website? Where can people buy the book? Tell us where to find out more.
You got it. Well, the book, again, is called Cracking the Leadership Code, 3 Secrets to Building Strong Leaders, and you can find it all at crackingtheleadershipcode.com. In fact, your listeners, you all can go to that page and you can download Chapter 1 for free right there to get a sense of my writing and what's in there. And also that page will link you to my website, which is alainhunkins.com, ALAINHUNKINS.com. And I obviously do speaking, writing, and consulting, and basically help people become stronger leaders through strengthening their connection, their communication, and their collaboration skills.
Alain, you have been just an absolutely great guest. I appreciate you putting up with me, for educating our listeners, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Fantastic. You too, Clay. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Thrive Nation.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!